I wrote a story at one point about this study of the dark web drug trade. And of course, the dark web drug trade did not end with the Silk Road, but the dark web drug trade on the dates that Ross Ulbricht's sentence was handed down actually increased significantly, in part just because of the people were so shocked, and the news around this life sentence was enough to actually bring just more attention to something that people still didn't know that much about at the time. This was, I think, 2015 that he was sentenced, and
I believe so, yeah.
And more just put a spotlight on the people. I think just learned from that news. Oh, you can buy drugs on the dark web, and that trade actually just continued to explode. And the Silk Road being taken down, just as happens in the drug war, created a power vacuum that was just immediately filled, first by the Silk Road 2, which was a kind of copycat site that was itself taken down, in part because, as you said, it was created by people who had worked on the first Silk Road, yes, and were therefore identified
quite easily. Yeah. And that was because of how they caught Ross and everything. And that's a very interesting story. I'd love for you to recount, because you spoke with him, as you said, July 4th, 2013. I believe he was caught like 4 months later, right?
Just 3 months. Yeah, I think it was the end of October, I think.
Yeah, something like that. He was caught in San Francisco.
Yeah, and he was like, working on his laptop, the laptop, in a public library. He had like tried to work in a coffee shop and couldn't find an outlet for his like laptop, and he was running out of battery or something. So he went to the library next door in San Francisco and was like sitting there in the science fiction section of the library, working, like looking out the window in a public place, which I think he might have done in part so that even if somebody could defeat the protections of Tor and find his IP address, it might look still like it would be less identifiable because he was on some other network. I don't know. It ultimately was not a wise move, because what happened, just to like describe it play by play, I guess, like he hears these people having a fight behind him. It's like this man sort of like raises his fist to hit a woman behind him. He turns around, and at that moment, another undercover agent across the table from him, a woman, grabs his laptop while it's still open, yanks it like out of his reach. He realizes that like he's actually surrounded by undercover agents. He lunges for the laptop, but it's too late. Like another agent has got him in a bear hug, and his laptop is open, logged into the Silk Road. He's got like, if he had, as I think I said, his encryption on his laptop, so that if he had just managed to shut the lid, then it would have been encrypted. With encryption, modern encryption is strong enough that like the FBI or whoever potentially might not have been able to crack that within like human lifetimes. Using the strongest computers they've got.
All he had to do was shut it.
So if he had just managed to shut the lid, he might have like prevented them from getting so much of the evidence that they used against them. He might have actually walked, I think. But he didn't, and they got the laptop with everything. I mean, he had on this laptop a journal of creating the Silk Road, a logbook of like daily activities, all of his chats with all of the people working for him, and Variety Jones, and everything. So, and a spreadsheet of his net worth, all of his assets and things. But as you said, like he, at the same time, he never spent most of the money that he was amassing, like the millions and millions of dollars in profits.
And Bitcoin.
He just sat on it and lived this almost ascetic life in San Francisco, like renting a room and like a house with other people. And, he when I interviewed him, even, he said to me, like, he spends almost none of his money, stays under the radar. And that was absolutely true. And I think that's because he was not, like, as I said, he's not Scarface. He was a guy with principles, doing this for some reason, some motivation other than money.
Yeah. And when they caught him, obviously they raided his place and everything. And so they found the flash drives that had the Bitcoin on it. And I can't remember now, but
a lot of it was on his laptop also.
It was on his laptop too.
Yeah.
Okay, so do they have that still today, or did they auction that off?
I think that all of the Silk Road coins were eventually auctioned. Yeah, I don't in the years that followed. Yeah, We didn't really talk about like how he was found, though. I mean, we should
Yeah,
say,
let's do that.
So even though the Silk Road was online for 2.5 years, his Bitcoins were not traced to identify him. Like, it still seems as late as 2013, 2014, that Bitcoin could not be traced to like find someone. When even in his trial, when they followed the money from his server to his laptop, that seemed like cheating because you've already identified the computers at both ends. And they had identified his server, by the way, through what I think was a vulnerability likely a vulnerability in the Tor anonymity software.
That's what I wanted to ask you about.
Well,
I forget the details now, and I actually should have looked at that earlier. I didn't remember that before we went on camera. But there was even, obviously, it wasn't you that wrote it, but there were a couple other articles. I believe one of them was in Wired when this all like came out, that did describe why like every hacker known to man, like a lot of the big names, I should say, went on record saying there is no possible way that Chris Tarbell and the cyber team at the FBI could have accessed this legally. They got this illegally. Well, it was in Iceland.
This was
a
very like a, I don't know, probably kind of inside baseball for the like hacker world, but there was a sort of controversy. The FBI tells the story that Ross Ulbricht just like set up Tor wrong on his server, and that it leaked its IP address, which is very possible. I mean, Ross was not like an expert hacker or cybersecurity expert. You know, he did the best he could for somebody who was making it all up as he went along, but it did seem likely to me and many like other people examining the case that there was an actual vulnerability in the Tor anonymity network itself that was somehow exploited to identify this server, and that it wasn't just like Ross had made a screw up, you know. And that would be important because it would suggest that the FBI had some vulnerability in Tor at least way back in 2013. Then when his case like was going to trial and pre-trial hearings, the defense basically said like, well, if we think that you used some secret vulnerability in Tor to do this, that you didn't, it wasn't just a mistake, like, and if so, then is that a Fourth Amendment violation? You basically hacked this server, Ross's Silk Road server, without a warrant.
Yep.
And you need to tell us how you did this. And the prosecution, very tellingly, I think, did not say, like, we didn't hack it, here's how we did it. They instead said, listen, even if we did hack it, here's why it's not a Fourth Amendment violation. And the reasons were, like, quite legalistic. Like, one was that Ross Ulbricht had never claimed it was his server, so how could it be a Fourth Amendment violation of his privacy if he won't say it's his server, which is like this terrible catch-22, you know? And then the other one was that it's located in a foreign country. It was in Iceland. It was in Iceland. Yeah. So you know, the FBI, the NSA, even whatever, can like hack a foreign server if it doesn't have an American involved without a warrant. And
didn't they say like the vulnerability was something with a CAPTCHA? Right.
The story initially was that Ross Ulbricht had set up the CAPTCHA on the Silk Road.
Right.
You know, this like, you know, the scrambled letters that like you used to log into the Silk Road, that leaked the IP address. But then when that was questioned, the prosecution essentially said, well, listen, we're not going to tell you how we did it, but we don't need to. The thing is, like, even if we did hack it, like, it's not a Fourth Amendment violation. So let's just move on. And that's what happened. In fact, the defense kind of seemed like they were trapped by this. They couldn't say like, okay, well, this is Ross Ulbricht's server and he has a privacy right to it, because they didn't want to admit that it was his server. So
yeah, I need to, like I said, I need to go look at that again. I should have been more ready for that,
well,
but it just didn't look like. I think the way you just described it, like catch-22, is the best way to describe how it got through, because the way that they went to defend it made no sense, and then they fell back on the, well, then admit it's yours. Thank you for watching the video, guys. Please hit that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.